The silence shattered like glass. ID now? What are you doing here, dressed like you own the place? The officer barked, his voice slicing through the golden afternoon. People turned, phones raised, eyes widening as the absurdity of the scene unfolded because standing before him was not a criminal, but a professor who had lectured on history, justice, and the very rights he was trampling in that moment. Professor Maya Thompson clenched her jaw, not out of fear, but fury. She had endured whispers in faculty halls, snide remarks from colleagues who underestimated her, and students who were shocked she held a PhD. But this was public humiliation, raw and unfiltered, staged by a man in uniform who saw only her skin, not her soul. The crowd thickened. A teenager whispered, "She teaches at the university." A mother shielded her child's eyes, as if to say, "Don't look at how ugly truth can be." Maya raised her voice, calm but cutting. "I am not required to show you anything unless you have probable cause." "Which you don't." The officer sneered, stepping closer, his shadow swallowing hers. "Probable cause? Lady, you look suspicious enough. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong color." The laughter in his tone stung more than the words. Her chest burned, not from shame but from the weight of centuries echoing through her veins. Voices of women before her, denied seats on buses, denied access to schools, denied dignity. And now, in 2025, denied humanity on a sidewalk she had walked every day for 10 years. Someone in the crowd muttered, "This ain't right." Another shouted, "Leave her alone, man." Phones angled higher, recording everything, the golden light catching her glasses, her steady breath, her refusal to bow. Maya thought of her father, a preacher who taught her that silence in the face of injustice was betrayal. She would not betray herself. She spoke louder, words ringing like a sermon. "You disgrace that badge with every breath you take." The officer's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but arrogance quickly masked it. He reached for her arm, fingers brushing her sleeve, ready to drag her like a criminal. Gasps shot through the crowd. Maya did not flinch. She met his gaze, unbroken, unafraid. And then, from behind the crowd, another voice thundered, "Officer Daniels, step away from her now." The command carried authority, not the shaky kind built on ego but the sharp, immovable kind forged by law and truth. The crowd parted like water, and two internal affairs investigators stepped forward, badges gleaming in the same golden sunlight. Cameras zoomed in. The officer froze, his hand still inches from Maya's arm. His face drained of color as one of the agents declared, "You are under investigation for racial misconduct and abuse of power. Effective immediately, you are relieved of duty." Hands where we can see them. The gasp this time was collective, a single breath sucked from the street. Maya stood motionless, heart pounding, watching as the man who had tried to strip her of dignity now fumbled with his own hands, trying to argue, trying to deny, but the cuffs clicked shut with a metallic finality that silenced him. The golden light washed over her, warm and fierce, as though the sun itself bore witness. For 3 minutes, she had been forced into a cage of humiliation. Now he stood shackled in the open, the world watching justice play its first note. And this was only the beginning. The officer's face crumpled as if the golden light had turned to fire, burning away his mask of authority. "This is a mistake," Daniel sputtered, sweat crawling down his temples. She was acting suspicious. "I had to." His excuses fell flat in the thickening silence. The crowd, moments earlier cowed by his voice, now stared with open contempt. The cameras didn't just capture his words, they captured his fear. Professor Maya Thompson didn't move. Her stillness was deliberate, her composure sharpened by years of knowing that one wrong gesture could cost her life. She let the scene unfold as if orchestrated by something greater than her will. Internal affairs didn't flinch. "We've reviewed weeks of footage, Officer Daniels," one agent said coldly, his voice a blade slicing through excuses. "Patterns of racial profiling, harassment, and intimidation. This," he gestured toward Maya and the crowd, "is not an isolated incident. It ends today." The cuffs were pulled tighter. Daniels winced, but no one rushed to comfort him. The golden sunlight painted his shame in stark relief, and for once, it was his turn to be exposed. Maya's chest expanded with a deep breath. She hadn't planned this moment, but perhaps destiny had. Every lecture she had given on systemic racism, Every paper she had written warning of institutional rot suddenly had living proof standing in front of hundreds. And those hundreds were watching, phones out, voices whispering louder now. She stood her ground. She didn't back down. She spoke truth. A young man in the crowd stepped closer. Professor Thompson, 2M in your sociology class. You taught us about racial microaggressions last week. His voice cracked with awe. This is exactly what you meant, isn't it? Maya's eyes softened. Yes, Marcus. This is exactly what I meant. Daniel snapped his head toward the student, eyes blazing. You shut your mouth. The agent yanked him backward. You don't give orders anymore. The power shifted like an earthquake beneath their feet. The crowd sensed it too. Where moments before there had been fear, now there was a surge of vindication. Some clapped softly, others raised their voices. Justice. About time. We see you, Professor. The chants grew, blending with the hum of city life, until the golden afternoon pulsed with a rhythm of defiance. Maya raised a hand, silencing them. Her words carried, steady and unshaken. This moment is bigger than me. This is about every person who's been stopped, searched, and silenced for nothing but the color of their skin. Don't just record this. Remember it. Change it. The street erupted, not with chaos, but with conviction. People nodded, eyes glistening, hearts burning with the truth that injustice was no longer invisible. Maya's voice had peeled the mask away. And yet, beneath her calm, a storm brewed. She knew too well that one arrest would not dismantle centuries of prejudice. Daniel's was a symptom, not the disease. But still seeing him cuffed, trembling, powerless was a crack in the wall. She would widen that crack. The agents began leading Daniels away. He struggled, his pride collapsing into raw desperation. This isn't over. You'll regret this, all of you. She set me up. She's dangerous. His voice dissolved into incoherence as the crowd drowned him out with jeers. Maya turned away, unwilling to grant him another second of her gaze. The sun dipped lower, its golden fingers stretching across the pavement, illuminating her like a spotlight. For the first time in what felt like years, she let herself smile not out of triumph, but out of relief that the world had witnessed the truth. But the story wasn't done. A reporter shoved through the crowd, microphone thrust forward. Professor Thompson, can we get a statement? How do you feel about what just happened? She exhaled slowly, choosing her words like stones placed in a river. I feel what any black woman in America feels when she survives an encounter like this, lucky to be alive, but furious it had to happen at all. The reporter blinked, stunned by her candor. The crowd murmured in agreement. A child tugged on her mother's sleeve and whispered, "She's brave." Maya's eyes watered, not from weakness, but from the weight of knowing that little girl's future was still fragile. She bent slightly and said, "One day, you won't have to be brave just to exist. That's what we're fighting for." The girl smiled, and for an instant, the golden light seemed to crown her, too. The agents disappeared with Daniels, swallowed by the police car waiting at the curb. The sirens did not wail. There was no triumphant parade. Just the stark image of a man undone by his own hate, and a woman who stood taller than his fury. But the ripples spread. Within minutes, news outlets streamed the footage live. Within an hour, hashtags burned across social media. Justice on Main Street, Stand with Maya, End Racial Profiling. Maya's name trended, her face immortalized in the glow of cell phone screens across the nation. She returned home that evening to find her inbox flooded with messages: students, strangers, fellow professors, activists. Some were supportive, others venomous. "You embarrassed him," one email spat. "You'll pay for it." She closed it calmly, accustomed to threats that came like shadows whenever truth was spoken. Yet beneath the fear, determination thrummed. She would not shrink. At her kitchen table, beneath the soft hum of the fridge, Maya replayed the moment in her mind. Daniel's sneer, the cuffs, the crowd's war, the sunlight that refused to abandon her. She whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." And she was right. The days that followed would test her, stretch her, threaten her in ways she could not yet imagine. But the seed had been planted. A golden moment, fragile but fierce, was now growing roots. Justice was stirring. The night after the arrest, the city did not sleep. Screens flickered with replayed footage of Daniel's downfall. Commentators debated on television, some furious at the humiliation of an officer, others calling it a historic turning point. The golden light of that afternoon had become a firestorm. Professor Maya Thompson sat in her living room, phone buzzing endlessly. Calls from fellow faculty, invitations to appear on national news, pleas from students begging her to speak at rallies. She held the device in her hands, but did not answer. Her mind drifted back to her father's words. When the spotlight finds you, child, it won't always be kind. But if truth led you there, you stand in it. She had stood. Now the question was how long she could endure the blaze. The knock at her door startled her. She hesitated, then opened it to find Marcus, the student who had spoken out during the confrontation. His eyes burned with urgency. Professor, they're planning a protest tomorrow. Everyone wants you to lead it. Maya's heart clenched. Marcus, a protest can ignite change, but it can also draw hate. Are the students ready for that? We're ready, he insisted. Because you showed us what courage looks like. Please, we need your voice. She studied him. Behind his determination, she saw both fear and hope, the delicate balance of a generation searching for guidance. Finally, she nodded. Then we will march. The next afternoon, the streets pulsed with footsteps. Students, teachers, parents, workers all gathered under the weight of history and the promise of tomorrow. Signs waved. End racial profiling. Justice is golden. We stand with Maya. The chant rose. No justice, no peace. Maya walked at the front, Marcus by her side, the sun once again spilling gold across their path as if blessing the defiance. Cameras rolled. Drones hovered overhead. Police lined the sidewalks, their presence heavy, watching. Among them, Maya spotted officers with tense jaws, hands twitching near batons. Yet she did not falter. Her voice soared above the crowd. We march not for vengeance, but for dignity. We march because silence is complicity. We march because tomorrow belongs to us, not to fear. The crowd erupted. The chant became thunder. Yet as the march wound toward the courthouse, shadows began to gather. Counter-protesters appeared, their faces twisted with rage, their shouts venomous. Go home. You're making this up. Support the police. Tension thickened like a storm cloud ready to break. One man lunged forward, spitting words that dripped with hate. Marcus flinched, but Maya raised her hand, steady and calm. Do not answer hate with hate, she told her people. We are stronger than that. But the crowd on the other side swelled, louder, angrier, emboldened by their own fury. The police tightened ranks, unsure whom to protect. For a moment, it seemed violence would erupt. Then something shifted. From the courthouse steps, a judgy elderly black woman named Evelyn Carter appeared, robe flowing in the golden light. Her presence silenced both sides. She raised her voice, brittle but powerful. Justice does not bend to shouting. It bends to truth. All eyes turned to her. She pointed toward Maya. That woman stood against humiliation and did not break. Today, we decide not whether one officer fell, but whether this city will rise. A hush fell. Even the counter-protesters faltered, their anger caught in the gravity of her words. Maya stepped forward, climbing the courthouse steps until she stood beside the judge. Together, they looked out over the sea of faces, fractured yet yearning. This is not about one officer, Maya declared. This is about a system that breeds men like him. And we will not rest until the system changes. The applause was deafening. Yet, deep in the crowd, a figure watched with narrowed eyes, a colleague of Daniel's, furious, plotting. Hatred rarely dies quietly. That night, Maya received a message slipped under her door. No signature. Just 4 words scrawled in red ink. You are next, traitor. Her hand trembled. She stared at the words until they blurred. Fear crept into her veins, whispering that maybe she had gone too far, that maybe survival required silence after all. But then she remembered the girl in the crowd, the child who whispered, she's brave. If Maya surrendered now, that little girl would grow up believing bravery was temporary. She could not let that happen. She reported the threat, though part of her new justice was selective, often deaf, when a black woman cried out. Still, she pressed forward. The following days were a whirlwind. Interviews, meetings with civil rights lawyers, endless debates on TV where strangers dissected her life as if she were a specimen rather than a woman. Through it all, she held her ground, though exhaustion gnawed at her bones. Then came the trial. Daniel sat in the courtroom, stripped of uniform, face pale and drawn. He no longer looked like an untouchable enforcer. He looked like a man cornered by his own cruelty. Witnesses testified. Video played. The golden afternoon replayed again and again, each frame a nail in his coffin. Maya took the stand last. The courtroom was silent as she spoke, her voice steady. He did not see a professor. He did not see a citizen. He saw only my skin, and in his eyes, that was enough to condemn me. That is not law. That is prejudice dressed in uniform. The jury listened, some leaning forward, others swallowing hard. Daniels glared at her, but his gaze had lost its power. When the verdict came guilty on multiple counts, the room exhaled as though the very walls had been holding their breath. Maya did not cheer. She did not gloat. She simply bowed her head and whispered, "For those who never lived to see this day." The golden light spilled through the courtroom windows, blessing her words. But outside, the world was not magically healed. Some hailed the verdict as progress. Others fumed, claiming Daniels had been sacrificed to appease the mob. Protests flared again, voices clashing louder than before. The battle for justice was far from over. Maya knew this, yet she also knew something had shifted irreversibly. The image of her standing tall, refusing to break, had pierced the nation's conscience. And once light enters, darkness cannot reclaim its throne so easily. One evening, weeks after the trial, Maya walked the same street where it had all begun. The sidewalk was quiet now, the golden sunset painting the bricks with memory. She paused, closing her eyes. She could still hear Daniels bark, feel the heat of his shadow, taste the bitterness of humiliation. But layered over it now was something else. The roar of a crowd united, the click of handcuffs binding hate, the voice of justice breaking through. She opened her eyes. Across the street, the young girl from the protest waved shyly. Maya waved back, a smile tugging her lips. For the first time in a long while, hope felt real. She whispered into the fading light, "The story isn't over. But we're writing a new chapter." Weeks turned into months, and though the trial was over, its echoes rippled through the city. In classrooms, in cafes, in living rooms, people debated what had happened. Some said Daniels was just one bad officer, an outlier. Others, especially those who had lived under the weight of constant suspicion, insisted he was proof of something far deeper, something festering in the very roots of the system. Professor Maya Thompson carried those conversations with her wherever she went. Each lecture she delivered was charged with new energy, her students leaning forward, eager to understand, eager to change. She wasn't just teaching theory anymore. She was teaching from the battlefield of lived experience. And yet, the threats never fully stopped. Hate mail arrived in waves. Anonymous voices online spat venom. Strangers stared too long in grocery stores. Maya learned to walk with her head high, even when fear whispered in her ear. She refused to be silenced. Then came the invitation. A national education conference wanted her to keynote. The theme, Truth in the Classroom, Justice in Society. At first, she hesitated. To stand on such a stage would mean reliving the ordeal once again, dissecting her humiliation in front of thousands. But then she remembered her father's words about the spotlight. She agreed. The day of the speech, the auditorium was packed. Journalists filled the back rows, cameras poised. Students waved homemade signs of support. Faculty from across the country murmured, waiting. Maya stepped to the podium, the golden stage lights washing over her like the same sunlight from that fateful afternoon. For a moment, she simply looked at them, hundreds of expectant faces, some skeptical, some hungry for wisdom. Then she began. 3 minutes, she said softly, and the room stilled. 3 minutes was all it took for a man in uniform to decide that my skin outweighed my credentials, my humanity, my right to stand in my own city. 3 minutes was all it took for humiliation to wrap around me like chains. She paused, her eyes scanning the room. But those same 3 minutes were also enough for truth to rise. Enough for courage to find its voice. Enough for justice to take its first step. The audience leaned in, breath held. Maya's voice grew stronger. Racism is not a shadow of the past, it is a hand that still grips the present. We can choose to look away, or we can choose to break its grip. That choice is not only for courts and juries. It is for classrooms, workplaces, dinner tables. It is for each of us. Applause thundered, rolling like waves. But Maya wasn't finished. She raised a hand, silencing them. Do not cheer for me. I am only one woman who refused to bow. Instead, ask yourselves, when humiliation, injustice, or cruelty stares into your eyes, will you stand? Will you risk your voice, your comfort, your safety? Because justice demands more than witnesses, it demands participants. The room erupted again, but this time the sound was different. It wasn't applause for a performance. It was a promise being born. After the speech, people swarmed her. Reporters thrust microphones, students begged for photos, activists pressed flyers into her hand. Amid the chaos, one figure approached quietly, the young girl from the protest, holding her mother's hand. She looked up, eyes shining. You said one day, I won't have to be brave just to exist. Do you really think that's true? Maya knelt, her heart swelling. I do, because I see you, and you are the future. My job is to fight so that your bravery can be used for dreams, not survival. The girl hugged her tightly, and in that embrace, Maya felt the weight of every ancestor, every fighter, every silenced voice urging her onward. Still, the story was not without pain. Daniels appealed his conviction, supported by groups who painted him as a victim of cancel culture. Marches for him sprang up in other towns. Maya's name was dragged through mud on certain networks, her character dissected, her motives questioned. But when asked if she regretted standing her ground, she answered simply, I regret nothing. Dignity is never negotiable. Months later, Daniel's appeal was denied. He was stripped of his badge permanently, sentenced not only to time behind bars, but to the weight of knowing the world had seen him for who he truly was. Maya did not attend the final ruling. She had no desire to watch his collapse again. Her energy was needed elsewhere. She poured herself into her students, into activism, into writing. Her essays reached national journals. Her name became synonymous with resistance that was steady, principled, unshakable. She was not perfect, she faltered. She wept in private. She carried scars invisible to the crowd. But she kept moving forward. One evening, as the city glowed under another golden sunset, Maya stood again on that sidewalk where everything had begun. She touched the bricks with her fingertips, whispering a prayer for all those who had once stood where she did, silenced and unseen. A small memorial had grown there, a plaque installed by local activists, engraved with her words, You disgrace that badge with every breath you take. Not as a reminder of hatred, but as a testament to courage. Flowers lay at its base. Someone had tied a ribbon in gold. Maya smiled faintly. She thought of her father, of the students who marched beside her, of the little girl who now believed the future might be brighter. She thought of Daniels too, not with bitterness, but with clarity. He was not her enemy. He was a symptom. The real enemy was the disease of prejudice itself. And that battle was far from finished. As she walked away, her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Professor, we just organized a new coalition. We want you to be our advisor. We're calling it the Golden Hour Movement because in those 3 minutes, the world changed. Her eyes blurred with tears. She typed back, Yes, let's change more than minutes. Let's change lifetimes. The sun dipped lower, painting the city in radiant gold. The same light that had once illuminated humiliation now crowned resilience. Maya lifted her face to it, letting it warm her skin. She was not naive, she knew hate still lurked, waiting. But she also knew this. Truth had broken through once, and it would again. Because courage, like sunlight, cannot be chained. And so the story closed not with despair, but with a beginning, an unshakable promise that though racism had humiliated her in 3 minutes, justice had answered in 3 minutes more, and the echo of that justice would ring for generations. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.